Dust hung heavy over the trading post that afternoon. It drifted in slow, tired spirals, kicked up by restless boots and hooves, settling into the seams of coats, into beards, into the silence between men who had learned to speak in numbers instead of names. They stood in a loose circle, not close enough to touch her, but close enough to decide her worth. Voices stayed low, not out of respect, but out of habit, like they were discussing livestock, like they had done this before. "She won't last long," one man said, squinting at her like she was something already half broken. "Too thin," another muttered, scratching his jaw. "Look at those hands," a third added, "not made for work." A few chuckled, not cruel enough to be memorable, just careless, and that, somehow, was worse. She stood in the center of it all, hands clenched so tightly her knuckles had gone pale beneath the dust, eyes lowered, fixed on the ground as if staring long enough might make it open, might swallow her whole before anyone could claim her. She didn't cry, didn't plead, didn't even breathe too loudly, because she had learned, long ago, that tears only made men look longer, and begging made them smile. So she stood still, like something already decided. The trader leaned against a wooden post, arms crossed, watching the circle tighten and loosen with the rhythm of interest and disinterest. "Good worker," he said lazily. "Doesn't talk back, eats little." A pause, then with a smirk, "And she's young." That drew a different kind of silence, heavier, colder. She felt it without looking up, felt the shift in the air like a storm turning. Her stomach twisted, but she didn't move, didn't give them the satisfaction. Bootsteps approached, slower than the rest, heavier. Not uncertain, but not eager either. The circle parted without being asked. That alone said something. He stepped into view, a mountain man, tall enough that the light caught him differently, casting long shadows across the dirt, broad shoulders beneath a worn coat that had seen too many winters to count, fur lining darkened with age, leather straps crossing his chest, holding a rifle that looked like it belonged there more than anywhere else. His hair was long, pulled back loosely at the nape of his neck. Strands had come free, stirred by the dry wind. His beard was thick, untrimmed, carrying flecks of dust and the faint memory of frost. But it was his eyes that stilled the space. Pale blue, quiet, not searching, not judging, just seeing. He didn't circle her, didn't step closer, didn't tilt her chin or reach for her arm the way others had. He simply stood where he was and looked. The trader straightened slightly. "Well now," he said, tone shifting into something almost respectful. "Didn't expect to see you down from the mountains." The man didn't answer. His gaze never left her. She felt it, not like the others, not heavy, not greedy, just there. For a moment, a small, fragile moment, she almost looked up, but she stopped herself, because hope was more dangerous than fear. Then he spoke, only one question. "How much?" The trader hesitated, just slightly, enough to show that this man was not like the others. "Depends what you're buying," he said carefully. The mountain man didn't blink. "She walks, she works." A pause. The trader named a price. Too low for a bride, too high for a servant. A number meant to test him, to see if he would laugh it off, or bargain, or walk away. He did none of those things. He reached into his coat, pulled out a worn leather pouch, and set it down, billed across the wooden crate between them, not counted, not argued,
just placed, final. The sound of metal against wood rang louder than it should have. The circle went quiet, not shocked, but unsettled. The trader stared for a second longer than necessary, then scooped up the coins. "Well," he said, forcing a grin, "seems she's yours." The word hung there. Yours. She felt it like a weight pressing down on her chest. Her body stiffened, every muscle tightening, bracing for what came next. Orders, hands, ownership. But none of it came. Instead, Bootsteps turned, away from her. He began to walk, just walked, as if the matter was already done. Confusion flickered through her chest, sharp, unwelcome. The trader frowned. "You're forgetting something?" he called after him. The mountain man stopped, half-turned. For the first time, his eyes shifted from her. They swept across the circle of men, not angry, not loud, but something in that look made a few of them straighten, made others suddenly interested in their boots. Then he said it, calm, even. "You walk behind me," he told her. "A beat. No one else touches you." Silence. Not the lazy silence before. This one had edges. The girl didn't move, didn't speak. Her mind struggled to catch up. That wasn't how this worked. That wasn't what came after being bought. Was it a trick? A test? A different kind of cruelty? Her heart began to beat faster, not from fear this time, from something she didn't recognize anymore. He didn't turn back to check if she followed, didn't reach for her, didn't repeat himself. He simply started walking again, away from the post, away from the circle, away from the men who had already decided what she was worth. The distance between them grew. 1 step, 2, 3. She stood frozen in the dust. Behind her, someone chuckled. "Give it a day," a voice muttered. "He'll change his mind." Another laughed quietly. "They all do." Her fingers tightened. Then, slowly, carefully, she lifted her gaze, just enough to see his back, broad, steady, unhurried. Not once looking over his shoulder, as if he wasn't afraid she'd run or refuse or disappear, as if the choice still belonged to her. Her breath caught, and for the first time since she had been brought to that post, she hesitated. Not because she was afraid to follow, but because something deep inside her whispered, this might be the first step she ever took that wasn't forced.
The cabin stood far from any road. Not the kind of distance measured in miles, but in silence, in the absence of voices, in the way the world seemed to forget this place existed the moment you stepped beyond the last broken trail. No neighbors, no town, no witnesses, only trees, tall pines that creaked in the wind like old bones, snow caught between their branches in pale, unmoving sheets, and beneath them a quiet so deep it pressed against the ears. She stopped a few steps behind him. The cabin looked smaller up close. Weathered wood, crooked roofline, smoke slipping from the chimney in a thin gray ribbon. It didn't look like a place where people lived. It looked like a place where people hid. He reached the door first, pushed it open with one hand, then stepped aside. "Inside," he said. That was all. No gesture, no impatience, just space. She didn't move. Her body had learned too well what doorways meant. They were lines. Once crossed, things changed. Voices lowered. Hands came closer. Choices disappeared. She waited for the second command, for the hand on her arm, for the push. None came. He didn't even look at her, just stood there,
eyes turned toward the trees, as if whatever decision she made had nothing to do with him, as if it mattered. That hesitation stretched longer than it should have, long enough for something fragile to rise beneath it. Slowly, she stepped forward, crossed the threshold. The air inside was warmer, not soft, but steady. A fire burned low in the hearth, not newly lit, but carefully kept, the kind of fire that didn't roar, just endured. The room was simple: one table, 2 chairs, a shelf with tin plates and a single cup, a rifle resting near the wall, and a bed. Her eyes found it instantly. Of course, they always did. Her stomach tightened before her mind could stop it. Her shoulders tensed. She turned slightly, already bracing for the shift in him, for the moment when silence broke into expectation. But behind her, he only stepped inside, closed the door against the wind, set down the small bundle of supplies he had carried from town. Then, without looking at her, he pointed. "You take that." Her breath caught. The words didn't fit, not with the room, not with the bed, not with anything she had ever known. "What?" she asked, the words smaller than she intended. "The bed," he said. Simple, unchanged. She stared at him. "And you?" she asked carefully. There it was, the question she knew how to ask, the one that usually led to laughter or something worse. He shrugged, a small movement beneath the weight of his coat. "I've slept in worse places." That was all. No explanation, no trade, no hidden demand waiting beneath it. Just fact. She didn't answer, didn't thank him, because gratitude had always come with a price, and she wasn't ready to believe this didn't. That night she didn't sleep. Not really. She lay on the edge of the bed, fully clothed, boots still on, body curled inward as if trying to take up less space. The fire cracked softly. Wind pressed against the cabin walls, then slipped away again. Across the room, he sat in a chair, not even close to the bed, hat pulled low over his eyes, rifle resting within reach. At first, she thought it was a trick, a waiting game. Men could be patient when they wanted something. She watched for signs, a shift in posture, a glance, the slow build of intention. Hours passed. Nothing changed. He didn't move toward her, not once. At some point, exhaustion pulled her under. Not fully, never fully, but enough that her breathing slowed, enough that the tension in her hands eased, just slightly. When she woke, it was morning, pale light slipping through the cracks in the wood. The fire had been fed. Water sat in a tin cup beside the bed, and he was gone. Her body went rigid instantly. She sat up, listened. Nothing. Then the door opened. He stepped inside, carrying a bundle of split wood, saw her awake, paused. "Water's clean," he said, nodding toward the cup, then crossed the room without waiting for a response, set the wood down, kneeled by the fire, and went about his work, as if she were not something to manage, not something to control, just there. Days passed like that, quiet, measured. He moved around her, not through her, always leaving space, always announcing himself with the smallest sounds, a shift of boots, a knock against the doorframe, never sudden, never close enough to startle. He brought water, chopped wood, cooked when there was meat. When there wasn't, he left what little food he had within reach, but never placed it directly into her hands, never forced the exchange, never watched her eat. At first she stayed distant, back pressed against walls, eyes always tracking, waiting for the moment something would change. It didn't. Time stretched, not healing, not yet, but softening, like ice that hadn't melted but had begun to crack beneath the surface. On the 5th night, the silence broke. Not because he spoke, but because she couldn't hold the question anymore. "Why?" she asked. The word came out sharper than she expected. He didn't look at her, didn't turn, just kept his hands near the fire, adjusting the wood. "Why what?" he said. Her fingers tightened in her lap. "All of it," she said. "This, the bed, the food, the space." Her voice faltered. "You bought me." There it was, the truth laid bare between them. He went still. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he leaned back a little, still not facing her. "Didn't buy you." She frowned. "I paid for you." The word stung, sharp, familiar. Her chest tightened. "That's the same thing." He shook his head once. "No." Silence stretched. She waited, for him to explain, for him to define the difference. He didn't. Instead, after a long moment, he said quietly, "Because someone should have." That was all. No story, no justification, no demand for understanding. Just a simple truth, laid down like a piece of wood on the fire. Because someone should have. Her breath caught. The words slipped past her defenses too easily, found something buried deep, something she hadn't touched in years. Memories flickered, hands that had taken, voices that had laughed, doors that had closed behind her without choice, and beneath it all, a single fragile thought. What if, once, someone had stepped aside instead of forward? What if a door had opened and stayed open? Her throat tightened. She turned her face away quickly, not wanting him to see it, not wanting herself to feel it. But it was already there, that crack, small, invisible, and yet undeniable. Not fear. Fear she understood. This was something else, something older, something she had buried so deeply she had forgotten its shape, something that felt dangerously close to safety. The fire shifted, a soft pop of wood breaking under heat. Across the room, he reached for another log, didn't look at her, didn't move closer, didn't take advantage of the silence. He simply stayed where he was, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't feel like she had to disappear to survive. She just sat there, breathing, listening, and slowly, painfully, beginning to believe that this quiet might not be a trap.
Trust did not come quickly. It did not arrive like warmth from a fire, sudden and complete. It came in fragments, small, careful, almost invisible, in the way he knocked before entering, not loudly, not to announce authority, but softly, as if asking permission from a space that was partly hers, in the way he turned his back when she washed at the basin near the window, his gaze fixed outside, giving her something she had never been given before, privacy, in the way he spoke only when needed, and when he did, his words carried no weight beyond what they were, no hidden edge, no expectation. Days turned into something slower, not peace, not yet, but something that didn't hurt. She began to move more freely inside the cabin, at first only when he wasn't looking, then even when he was. She no longer stayed pressed against the walls, no longer flinched at every shift of shadow. Her steps softened, her breathing steadied, still cautious, still watching, but no longer bracing for impact. He noticed. Of course he did. But he said nothing, never pushed, never reached, as if he understood that whatever was growing between them would break the moment it was named too soon. Then, one night, the past found her anyway. It came without warning, no sound, no slow creep of memory, just darkness splitting open. She was back there,
hands gripping her arms too tightly, voices thick with drink and laughter, the smell of sweat, of smoke, of something rotting beneath it all. "No!" she gasped, but the word never made it out. Her body jerked, her breath snapped short, and suddenly she was sitting upright in the bed, fingers clawing at the air like she was trying to tear herself free from something that wasn't there anymore. A scream wrecked from her throat, raw, uncontrolled, the kind that came from somewhere deeper than fear. It echoed against the cabin walls, and then he was there, instantly. Not because he had been waiting, but because he had been listening, always listening. He crossed the room in 2 strides, then stopped, 3 steps away, close enough to reach her, far enough not to. Her chest heaved, eyes wide, unfocused, seeing something else, somewhere else. Her hands were still shaking, gripping the blanket like it might disappear if she let go. "You're safe," he said. His voice was low, steady, not commanding, not forcing, just there. She shook her head violently. "No," she whispered. "No, they'll come back." Her voice cracked. "They always do." Her gaze darted to the door, to the windows, to the shadows that flickered in the firelight, looking for shapes, for movement, for the past, trying to follow her into the present. Silence stretched. He didn't move closer, didn't try to take her hands, didn't touch her shoulders the way another man might have. Even now, even here, even when she was breaking apart in front of him, he held the line. 3 steps. That distance wasn't hesitation, it was a choice. Then, slowly, he spoke. "I won't let them take you again." The words didn't rise, didn't fall. They didn't try to convince. They didn't try to soothe. They simply existed, like stone, like something that had already been decided long before this moment. She stilled, just slightly, her breathing still ragged, her hand still trembling, but something in her gaze shifted. She looked at him, really looked this time, not as a man who had bought her, not as a threat waiting to reveal itself, but as something she didn't yet have a name for. "Why?" she asked. The question came softer now, not sharp, not defensive, just searching. For the first time since she had known him, he met her eyes, fully. No distance, no looking away. The firelight flickered across his face, catching in the lines carved by wind, by cold, by time. "Because I know what it's like," he said. He didn't elaborate, didn't explain, didn't offer her a story to hold on to, but something passed between them in that moment. Not words, something deeper. She saw it, not clearly, not completely, but enough. Loss. Not fresh, not loud, the kind that had settled deep into the bones, the kind that stayed quiet because speaking it wouldn't change anything. Guilt, worn into him, not like a wound, but like a scar, something he carried without expecting it to heal. A past, not unlike hers, different in shape, but not in weight. Her fingers loosened slightly. The grip she had held so tightly on the blanket eased. Her breath came slower, still uneven, still fragile, but no longer breaking. He didn't move, didn't step closer even now, as if he understood that this moment didn't belong to him. It belonged to her, to whether she chose to close the distance or keep it. The fire cracked softly, a log shifting under heat. Time stretched. Then, slowly, carefully, she swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her feet touched the floor, cold, real, present. Her eyes never left his. She stood, not fully steady, but standing. 1 step forward. He didn't move. Another. Stillness, until the distance between them, 3 steps, became 2, then 1, and stopped. Close, but not touching. Never touching. Her voice when it came was barely more than breath. "You really wouldn't let them?" she asked. Something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, not pride. Something quieter, something absolute. No, that was all. No promise dressed in pretty words, no vow, just truth. She nodded, once, slowly, as if testing the weight of it. Then, without another word, she turned, walked back to the bed, and lay down again. This time, she slept. Not peacefully, not deeply, but without screaming. Across the room, he returned to his chair, hat lowered once more, rifle resting beside him. The same as before. Nothing changed. And yet, everything had. Because from that night on, she moved a little closer. Not in distance. He still gave her space, still knocked, still turned away, still never touched her. But something inside her shifted. The way she watched him, the way he listened when he spoke, the way silence between them no longer felt like something empty, but something shared. Trust did not arrive all at once. It never did. But it had begun. Not built on words, not built on promises, but on something far rarer. A man who could have taken and chose not to, and a woman who had nothing left to give, beginning, slowly, to believe she no longer had to.
They came at dusk. That quiet hour when the world held its breath between light and dark, when shadows stretched long across the ground and even the wind seemed to hesitate. She was the first to see them, not because she was watching, but because some parts of fear never slept. They lived beneath the skin, waiting, remembering. 3 shapes moved along the tree line, at first just silhouettes against the fading sky, then horses, slow, unhurried, certain. Her body reacted before her mind could, every muscle locked, her breath caught sharp in her throat. The air in the cabin shifted, thickening around her like something closing in. "It's them," she whispered. The words barely made it out, but he heard. Of course he did. He always did. He didn't ask how she knew, didn't ask what they wanted, didn't ask how many. He simply stood. The chair scraped softly against the floor, one smooth movement, controlled, practiced. He reached for the rifle, checked it, loaded it. The sound of metal sliding into place cut through the silence like a line being drawn. Final. She watched him, heart pounding, waiting for hesitation, for doubt, for that flicker that meant he might reconsider, that meant she was too much trouble, too much danger. It didn't come. He moved toward the door, stopped only long enough to glance back, not at her face, not at her fear, but at the space between them. A quiet question. She didn't understand it at first, then she did. Stay or come? Her breath trembled. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to stay small, to disappear the way she always had. But something else rose with it, something new, something fragile, but stubborn. She nodded, just once. He opened the door. Cold air rushed in. He stepped outside, and she followed. Not close, not behind him like before, but not hidden either. The men dismounted slowly, boots hitting the ground with deliberate weight, like they had all the time in the world, like this place already belonged to them. "Well now," one of them grinned. His teeth were too white for a man like him. "Didn't think we'd have to track you this far." Another spat into the dirt, eyes sliding past the mountain man, landing on her. Recognition lit up his face. "There she is," he said. "Told you she wouldn't get far." Her stomach twisted. The past wasn't distant anymore. It stood right in front of her, breathing, smiling, waiting to take. She took a step back without thinking, the cabin wall pressed cold against her spine. "You don't belong here," the second man said. His voice was softer, more dangerous. "You were paid for." The words hit harder than any blow. Paid for, like a thing, like something that could be returned, claimed, taken back.
Her fingers curled at her sides. Her breath came shallow. But she didn't run, didn't turn, didn't disappear. Not this time. The mountain man stepped forward. Just one step. Enough. She stays. 2 words. Flat. Final. The men laughed, not loudly, not wildly, just enough to show they didn't take him seriously. "Then we'll take her from you," the first said. He reached for his gun. Everything that followed happened fast, too fast for thought to catch up. Just movement, sound, violence. The mountain man fired first, not because he wanted to, but because he had already decided. The shot cracked through the air, sharp, clean. The first man staggered backward, surprise still on his face as he fell. The second fired in return. Wood splintered behind Elias, dust kicked up at his feet. She flinched, but didn't scream, didn't run. Her body trembled, but her feet stayed planted, because leaving now would mean going back, and she would not go back. The third man lunged forward, closing distance, too close for rifles, too close for space. They collided. Fists, steel, breath. The fight was brutal, not graceful, not heroic, just survival. She saw the moment Elias took a hit, a flash of blood. Her heart stopped. "Behind you!" she shouted. Her voice cut through everything, raw, urgent. He turned just in time. The second man fired again, missed, barely. Elias moved faster, stronger, more certain. One shot, then another. Silence fell like something heavy, sudden, final. 2 bodies lay still in the dirt. The third was crawling, hands dragging through dust, breath rattling in his chest, blood spreading beneath him in dark, uneven shapes. "She ain't worth this," he rasped. His voice broke, weak, desperate, still trying to bargain, even now. Elias stood over him, rifle lowered, eyes steady. For a moment, it looked like he might finish it, end it clean, end it completely. The man coughed, spat blood. "She's just—" Elias cut him off. "No." The word was quiet, but it carried more weight than anything else that had been said. "She's worth more than you'll ever understand." The man laughed weakly, a broken sound, then coughed again. He waited for the final shot, for the end. It didn't come. Elias stepped back, lowered the rifle completely. "Go," he said. The man blinked, confused. "You heard me." A pause, long, uncertain. Then slowly, painfully, the man dragged himself to his feet, stumbled toward his horse, climbed up with shaking hands, and rode. Not fast, not proud, just away. The dust settled behind him. Silence returned, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one carried something else, something heavier, something earned. She stood where she had been the entire time, heart still racing, hand still trembling, but alive, still here. Elias turned, looked at her, not checking, not claiming, just seeing. "You all right?" he asked. She swallowed, nodded. Then, after a moment, she stepped forward, closed the distance between them, not by accident, not by fear, by choice. And when she stopped beside him, not behind, not hidden, beside, something shifted in the air between them. Not protection, not ownership, something deeper, something shared. The fire inside the cabin still burned, steady, unbroken, and for the first time, the past had come for her and left empty-handed.
Morning came quiet. Not the kind of quiet that followed fear. Not the hollow silence after something had been taken. This was different, softer, as if the land itself had exhaled. No voices, no footsteps that didn't belong, no shadows stretching toward the door. Just wind moving gently through the trees, branches shifting, snow loosening in soft falls from high limbs, the world continuing, as if it had decided for once not to break anything else. She stood at the doorway, barefoot against the worn wood,
one hand resting lightly against the frame, not gripping, not bracing, just there. Outside, he worked, like he always did, bent slightly over the fence line, hands steady as he tied new wire where the old had snapped, movements slow, deliberate, familiar. There was no urgency in him, no tension left over from the night before, no sign that 3 men had come to take something from him and failed. He worked like a man who had already put it behind him, or perhaps like a man who had never believed it would end any other way. She watched him for a long time, long enough for the cold to creep into her skin, long enough for the question inside her to settle into something solid, because everything had changed, and yet nothing had. He hadn't come inside to check on her in the night, hadn't stood over her bed, hadn't asked if she was afraid, hadn't reminded her what he had done for her, hadn't claimed anything, not even a word, not even a look. The door had remained open, the choice untouched. Her fingers curled slightly against the wood. She had spent her whole life reacting, moving when told, staying when forced, leaving when there was no other option. Even survival had never really been hers. It had always belonged to someone else's decision. Until now. She stepped forward, one foot onto the dirt, then the other. The cold bit sharper outside, but she didn't stop. She walked toward him, slowly, deliberately, each step measured, not by fear, but by intention. He heard her. Of course he did. He always did. But he didn't turn right away, didn't straighten, didn't interrupt the work in his hands, as if he already knew this moment wasn't something to rush. She stopped a few feet away, close enough to speak without raising her voice. "You could have left," she said. Her voice was steady, not accusing, not testing, just true. He tied off the wire, pulled it tight. Only then did he look up, met her gaze without surprise. "I could have," he said. No hesitation, no defense, just acknowledgement. She studied his face, the lines carved by weather and years, the quiet that never seemed to leave his eyes. "You could too," he added. The words landed differently, not as a challenge, not as a push, but as a mirror. Her breath caught just slightly. She looked past him for a moment, toward the trees, toward the long stretch of wilderness beyond, empty, endless, free. "I don't have anywhere else," she said. The truth came easily, too easily. It had always been the truth, for as long as she could remember. There had never been a place waiting for her, only places she had been sent, taken, used, left behind. He watched her quietly, then said, "For now." 2 words, soft, unassuming, but they shifted something. She frowned slightly. "For now?" she repeated. He shrugged, a small movement. "You stay because you choose to, not because you got nowhere else." Her chest tightened. That wasn't how the world worked, not the one she had known. Choice had never been part of it. "You can leave," he continued, "any time." No emphasis, no hidden meaning, just fact. "If you want." The space between them widened, not in distance, but in understanding. He wasn't offering her safety in exchange for staying. He wasn't building a cage with softer walls. He was opening the door and stepping back. Her eyes filled, not with fear, not with the sharp burning panic she had carried for so long. This was different, quieter, heavier, something rising from a place she had buried too deep to name. She stepped closer, slowly, carefully, not because she had to, because she wanted to. Close enough now to see everything, the roughness of his hands, the faint scar along his jaw, the way his eyes held steady, never pulling, never demanding. A man who could have taken, who had every opportunity, every right by the world's cruel measure, and yet never had. Not once, not even when she had been her weakest, not even when she had been breaking apart in front of him. He had given her space, given her silence, given her time, the three things no one else ever had. "I want to stay," she said. The words trembled, not from fear, from weight, from truth. His breath stilled, just for a moment, a quiet shift in his chest, not hunger, not possession, something deeper, something almost unfamiliar, relief. He nodded once, a small motion, barely visible. "Then you stay." That was all. No vow, no promise of forever, no reaching hand, no closing distance, just acceptance, clean, uncomplicated, true. They stood there for a long moment, neither moving, neither speaking. The wind passed between them, soft against their clothes. The trees whispered overhead, and something settled, not loud, not dramatic, but steady, like the fire in the cabin, like the rhythm of breath returning after being held too long. For the first time in her life, she was not owned, not bought, not traded, not taken. She was not waiting for something to be asked of her, not bracing for something to be taken away. She was simply there, because she had chosen to be. Her hand lifted slightly, almost without thought, then stopped, hovering. The old fear flickered, not of him, but of what reaching might mean, what it might cost. He saw it, of course he did, and he didn't move, didn't close the gap, didn't take that last step for her. He left it there, uncrossed, untouched. Her breath trembled, then steadied, and slowly she closed the distance. Her fingers brushed his hand, light, barely there, as if testing whether something real could feel this gentle. He didn't react, didn't tighten, didn't pull, just let it be. Let her choose what came next. And for the first time, touch wasn't something taken, it was something given, freely, softly, without fear. Her fingers curled slightly against his, not holding, just resting. And that was enough. No words followed, none were needed, because somewhere between silence and survival, something had begun. Not with fire, not with passion, not with the sharp, fleeting intensity she had learned to fear, but with something slower, something stronger, something that didn't demand, didn't rush, didn't break. Safety, the rarest thing either of them had ever known, and from it, something even rarer, a kind of love that didn't take, didn't claim, didn't cage, just stayed, because it was chosen.